A president's job is supposed to be temporary, 4 or 8 years. Then you go home and someone else takes the chair. And yet a few presidents never really leave. They stay in the wiring of the country. You feel them in laws that still shape your paycheck, in wars that drew the map you live on, in arguments that refuse to die. Tonight, we're going to walk through 5 of those presidencies. Not the best, not the worst, but 5 that left fingerprints on the system itself. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Franklin Roosevelt, Ronald Reagan, and Donald J. Trump. Very different men, very different moments. What they have in common is simple. After each of them, being president meant something different than it had before. Keep a quiet scorecard as we go. What did they actually change? Who paid for it? And what does it still cost us now? Let's start at the beginning. George Washington did not apply for a job. He walked into a vacuum. The Constitution created a presidency on paper, but nobody knew what that looked like in practice. There was no Mr. President, no cabinet, no term limit, no tradition to hide behind. Washington had to invent the role while everyone watched. He did it by saying no to power almost as often as he said yes. He created a cabinet so the executive branch would be something more than one man's hunches. He accepted being called Mr. President instead of the royal-sounding titles some senators proposed, to signal that this office was Republican, not monarchical. Most importantly, after 2 terms he walked away, setting an informal 2-term limit that nobody broke for more than a century. In foreign policy, he made another choice that still echoes. In 1793, with Europe on fire again, he issued a proclamation of neutrality, insisting that the young republic would not be dragged into old world wars before it could stand on its own legs. In his farewell address, he warned about faction, sectionalism, and entangling alliances, warnings Americans quote every time they think about ignoring them. Washington's impact wasn't a program or a battle, it was precedent. He showed that the presidency could be powerful without being permanent, dignified without being royal, independent without being a loose cannon. Every president after him either followed those unwritten rules or broke them on purpose, knowing exactly whose shadow they were standing. Abraham Lincoln stepped into a different kind of vacuum, a country that had technically existed for decades but was now trying to tear itself in half. His first and overriding job, as he saw it, was brutally practical: to save the Union. Slavery was the core of the crisis, but in his early months he spoke more about union than emancipation, hoping to keep border states from bolting. The war forced his hand. By 1862, it was clear that you couldn't fight a rebellion built on slavery while pretending slavery was off the table. On January 1st, 1863, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring enslaved people in the rebelling states forever free. It didn't end slavery everywhere. That required the 13th Amendment. But it flipped the war's logic. The Union was no longer fighting just to glue the old country back together. It was fighting to create a different one. The proclamation also changed the international math. By explicitly tying the Union cause to abolition, Lincoln made it politically poisonous for Britain or France, both already hostile to slavery, to recognize the Confederacy. The decision was moral, strategic, and irreversible. After Lincoln, you couldn't talk about the American presidency without talking about what it owed to freedom and what it might risk to keep the republic whole. He didn't just preserve a union, he changed what that union claimed to stand for. If Washington created the office and Lincoln refounded the nation, Franklin Delano Roosevelt rewired the relationship between Americans and their federal government. When Roosevelt took office in 1933, the Great Depression had shattered banks, jobs, and confidence. He responded with a flood of legislation: banking reforms, emergency relief, public works, farm supports, what he called a New Deal for the American people. The idea was straightforward and radical. In a crisis that large, only the federal government was big enough to act as rescuer, regulator, and experimenter. The New Deal didn't fully end the Depression, Unemployment remained stubbornly high until World War II spending surged. But it left behind an alphabet of agencies and programs: Social Security, securities regulation, labor protections that defined economic citizenship for generations. It also built a new political coalition of workers, minorities, and urban voters that kept Democrats dominant in national politics for decades. Then came the war. FDR became the only U.S. president elected 4 times, steering the country through global conflict while presiding over a military-industrial complex machine, bigger than anything Washington or Lincoln could have imagined. When he died in 1945, he left behind not only a superpower, but also a new expectation: that presidents would be judged not just on keeping the peace and enforcing the law, but on whether they could manage the economy itself. After Roosevelt, "What is the president doing about the economy?" stopped being a weird question and became the first one. By the late 1970s, that economic engine was misfiring. High inflation, high unemployment, oil shocks, and a sour national mood. Ronald Reagan ran on a simple promise: the government was the problem, not the solution. Once in office, Reagan pushed through a package that would take his name: Reaganomics. The theory was that cutting taxes, trimming regulations, and slowing the growth of social spending would unleash private investment and pull the economy out of stagflation. His administration slashed top income tax rates, deregulated key industries, and dramatically increased defense spending. The results are still debated. Supporters point to the long expansion that followed, the eventual defeat of double-digit inflation, and a renewed sense of American confidence. Critics point to rising deficits, growing inequality, and the gutting of some safety net programs. Either way, the economic playing field shifted. After Reagan, both parties had to operate inside a new default. Low taxes are good politics. Markets deserve the benefit of the doubt, and presidents are expected to be cheerleaders for growth. Reagan's impact wasn't just domestic. His mix of militarized pressure on the Soviet Union and eventual willingness to negotiate arms control deals helped frame the end of the Cold War. He popularized an image of America as a shining city on a hill, optimistic, entrepreneurial, and suspicious of big government. That still fuels arguments today. So where does Donald J. Trump fit into this line? Start with this. Trump did not come from the usual presidential pipeline. No governorship, no general's uniform, no previous office in Washington. He arrived as a celebrity businessman whose name was already a global brand. His election in 2016 signaled something basic. Millions of voters were willing to smash the existing political mold in the hope that someone from outside it might deliver different results. In economic policy, Trump borrowed Reagan's language about taxes and regulation, and then drove it in a new direction. In 2017, he signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, a major package that lowered corporate tax rates and cut individual taxes for many households, especially in the short term. His administration also rolled back a wide range of regulations, from environmental rules to financial oversight. On trade, he broke more sharply with recent tradition, where both parties had largely embraced globalization and free trade agreements. Trump imposed tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars of imports, most notably on Chinese goods, and framed them as leverage to protect American industry. Some sectors gained protection. Others suffered from retaliatory tariffs and higher input costs. His approach signaled a shift away from pure free trade orthodoxy toward a more confrontational, nationalist economic policy. His impact on the federal judiciary was even more durable. In a single term, Trump appointed 3 Supreme Court justices: Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, tilting the court to a conservative majority that has already reshaped rulings on everything from regulation to abortion, and will likely continue to do so for decades. In foreign policy, Trump questioned pillars of post-1945 U.S. strategy. He publicly pressured NATO allies on defense spending, withdrew from or renegotiated several international agreements, and moved the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, a symbolic step previous administrations had hesitated to take. Supporters saw these moves as overdue corrections, a realism that put American interests first. Critics saw them as damage to alliances and norms that had underpinned relative stability. And then there are the norms around the presidency itself. Trump's use of social media as a direct, often combative channel to tens of millions of followers turned every news cycle into a referendum on his latest post. His refusal to accept the 2020 election results and the subsequent attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021, forced a reckoning about how much a president's words can bend public trust in elections and institutions. However you interpret those events, they ensure that any future discussion of presidential power, accountability, and the guardrails of democracy will have to pass through the Trump years. If you're still listening and your blood pressure is somewhere between fascinated and furious, good. History that matters should make you feel something. Look at our 5 presidents side by side. Washington proved the office could be strong and still step down. Lincoln proved it could be used to destroy an entrenched injustice at the cost of unimaginable blood. Roosevelt proved it could become the engine of a modern welfare state democracy. Reagan proved it could reset economic philosophy and national mood in the middle of a crisis without a world war. Trump proved, depending on your angle, that the office could be seized by populist anger, redirected against existing institutions, and used to challenge assumptions both parties thought were settled, from trade to alliances to judicial appointments. Each of them expanded, tested, or warped the job description of President of the United States, and each left future presidents with a different set of tools, shortcuts, and tripwires. So the real question isn't just who had the biggest impact. It's this: when we hand someone the keys to that office, which of these ghosts are we inviting back into the room? The founder who walked away? The wartime refounder who changed what freedom meant? The architect of the modern state? The storyteller of the free market? The outsider who turned the inside out? If you want more than slogans, if you want to trace how those choices were actually made, on paper and in smoke-filled rooms, stick around. The next episodes will walk into other presidencies, other turning points, other moments when one person in that office made the whole country tilt. Good history is slow. Algorithms are not. If you want the slow version to survive, you already know what to do.